Hi, welcome to the Northern Voice. I'm Kelly and we're joined here today by Mayor Dave Budd and Labour mayoral candidate Mick Thompson. The other Middlesbrough candidates were invited but unfortunately were unable to attend. Today we will be discussing how Middlesbrough is changing for young people, Mick's manifesto and answering your pressing questions. So, what do you love most about Middlesbrough?
Since it was first built, it's been somewhere that's been quite dynamic. And it had slowed down a bit, that change, and I think now it's speeding up again. It's become a place for everybody, especially young people.
Mick?
It's got a fascinating history because it's almost a new town. It was a creation of the Industrial Revolution with iron making and then steel making. The first ever railway, passenger railway in the world extended into Middlesbrough. So it's got that, it just grew massively in a very short space of time, and my family history is tied up with the history of Middlesbrough, so it has a special place for me, obviously.
So can you tell us a bit about what you do?
I'm currently the executive member for Culture, Communities and Communicate, the 3 C's, communication. Dave, as the mayor, has an executive and each of us have a portfolio of responsibilities. So mine again is communities and culture, so some of the real serious stuff around antisocial behaviour, domestic abuse, homelessness, but some of the softer side as well about supporting community activity, community volunteers, and I also chair the North East Migration Partnership, so I have a handle on migration as well.
So what do you do, Dave?
Well, if I choose my executive correctly, there's nothing left to do. But I think it's a sort of an overall look at it. Mick's already mentioned culture, and that's a particular interest of mine, because I think that's one of the ways in which we can change places. It's something that we need to explain, because it's an awkward word like arts. But when you talk about heritage and your history and what's happening now, and entertainment and football, and you know, it's such a broad subject that it affects everybody. And I think that's one of the ways that I know that you can really regenerate a place. It's something that we get in the northeast of England. It's still quite unusual, believe it or not, in other parts of the country. But I think internationally, because of what happened on the banks of the Tyne and Gateshead and Newcastle, and the way that they changed, I think internationally we are an example, and that now includes Middlesbrough, of how to do it and to involve people in it.
What are you doing to improve Middlesbrough for young people?
I don't think we necessarily divide people into segments. I know from research which I was involved in some time ago that there was a view at one time, these are young people's subjects, and there was a whole list of, you know, often green areas. The research said that wasn't quite true. Young people are interested in where they're going to live, in what the streets are like, in you know, in the level of crime, for example, in a whole range of things. So I don't think we should necessarily restrict it to young people. But the whole aim, and it's a very broad regeneration strategy, which includes, you know, anything from housing to the university and the colleges. It's about, in my mind, where young people want to be. Do they disappear off somewhere else, like a lot of them did, and fewer do now? Do people who come to university here want to stay here? You know, and is there something available for them? So there's a whole range of things which tie up into young people. And I think one of the things is to get more ambition into young people. When they're coming here today, there are a lot of students from a school walking around, and that should be normal. And a few years ago it wasn't. And perhaps, you know, that sort of ambition and aspiration in young people is something that takes some doing, because it's got to be real. You can't fool people. So that's one of the drivers behind the whole of our regeneration policy.
Have you got anything to add, Mick?
Yeah, I want to make ensure that young people in Middlesbrough have a voice, and I don't think that's often the case. I think people of my generation, if I could say that, sometimes can be a bit patronising about young people, and as somebody that's got children who've grown up, my son came to this university, and grandchildren, I just think it's really important they feel they've got a stake here. But the question about what are you going to do for young people, I would like to turn that around on its head. Here, young people are shaping this place through this university, through our culture, through live music, through the bars and restaurants that are growing up in the town. And I want to, my philosophy is not telling people what they should have, but working with people, and it's about doing things with people. So one of the first things that I want to do is pull together, we've talked about the young person's panel, is to pull together a group of young people and let's have a debate and a discussion about what their experience is of Middlesbrough. How is that good, and we need to keep doing that. What do we need to change? So it's young people shaping this place.
So Dave, why are you stepping down as mayor?
Age. Because it's a big commitment, and when I decided effectively there would have been for another 4.5 years if I'd wanted to stay and got elected again. And whilst I'm reasonably okay at the moment, that felt like a long time. I think we've moved on so much, and it's an easy thing for me to say, but it's true. But I'm surrounded by people who are very good at what they do, including Mick. And I know, things will continue and get better as well, because, we need to keep on changing.
So Mick, why are you running for mayor?
Well, to follow on from what Dave has said, I've been part of the team that sort of led this really exciting resurgence in Middlesbrough. It hasn't happened by accident. It's happened because as a council, we've created that environment, we've created that infrastructure for investment here. So as part of that team, I want to ensure that that keeps going, because there is a danger that if there's a wholesale change and there's a whole new way of looking at the place, the danger is that we'll start to slide back and we'll see that progress halted. So I want to keep that progress going, building on what we've done, what Dave's done, what we've done as an executive, and keep renewing and refreshing new ideas, pushing the boundaries all of the time.
Would you have any advice for Mick?
Vic and I have known each other for a long time, so we've had conversations rather than advice for all of that time. One of Mick's great strengths is his background in communities, so he absolutely gets the sort of things that he's been talking about involving people, and I think that we've spent 4 years and a little bit longer than that, a lot of which has been involved in physical regeneration, the buildings that have changed, the businesses that are here and so on. And that's very obvious, but we launched a social regeneration recently. That's Mick's great strength. That's the difficult bit. You can take risks and build buildings, but if you don't involve the people, if it doesn't mean anything to them, then that's a bit meaningless, and that's where we're going next, and that's Mick's great strength.
But earlier this week, we gave you the opportunity to send in your questions for the mayoral candidates on social media. Sam wants to know what can be done to combat homelessness in the area.
I think to explain homelessness to start with, don't confuse it with people who are on the street begging. That is a very different thing. We have, through various agencies, got a huge amount of information about individuals which we don't talk about. The people who you see who perhaps you assume are homeless, a lot of them have genuine, real problems around alcohol and drugs and many other things, mental problems as well. So that, those people have problems, but it's very often not homelessness. Homelessness in this area is pretty small in number. It's still serious, and we have a lot of ways of combating that. But I think the more we find out about people, the more we're able to help them, because the solution isn't to throw money into a hat. It's often something completely different, and we have a lot of agencies trying to help people.
I mean, I'll just repeat that point, that it's very easy for people to confuse people they see sat in a doorway asking for money with homelessness. And we know that in places like London and Manchester, there's a real crisis and people are in their large numbers sleeping on the street. We're quite fortunate in Middlesbrough that the availability of accommodation is still quite high, so people are not homeless because there isn't anywhere to put them. They're usually there because they've got a chaotic lifestyle, they find themselves on the street. I've been surprised when I talk to some people who are out there on the street that they find almost, and I'm not condoning it, but find a degree of camaraderie. Yeah. We don't just give somebody some accommodation, we want to intervene in their lives with them to tackle some of those issues around substance misuse and drugs and alcohol. And we've got some great success stories with that, but there are people who find themselves back there, but we never give up on people. We have a team called Breaking the Boundaries. We're out there day and night. They know all of the people that are out there, and they're constantly assisting them in finding secure accommodation. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, but we will never give up.
Our next question is from Daniel. He thinks that crime in Middlesbrough is a huge problem and wants to know how you can help make Middlesbrough feel safer.
I think that the funding that we get from government almost treats Cleveland and Middlesbrough like a rural area, and there are some parts of rural Cleveland, but the problems that we've got are the sort of problems you find in a metropolitan area in a city. So the funding doesn't match the demand. Now, our police force, I think, do really, really well in very, very difficult circumstances. And it is a constant battle. We have to be creative about what we do. We have to we work a lot in partnership with organisations. But yeah, it is really difficult keeping on top of that. If we had the funding that matched the problem, we'd be able to get on top of that, I'm sure. But it doesn't stop us trying, and we keep going.
Dave, why do you think people feel unsafe in Middlesbrough?
Well, I think that there is something very, very simple and basic. We've lost 500 police officers and 50 PCSOs in the last 10 years. That's bound to have an effect, because visibility of policing is something that makes people feel more comfortable. It does have an effect as well. So, you know, that is a basic problem, and as Mick mentioned, that's about money from the government, and it's just not there anymore. But there are different ways of working. It doesn't cover up the fact that we've lost those 500 police officers, but working together with the police. They used to be separate in some ways, and they're not now. We have a lot of conversations with them, you know, particularly about city centre issues and so on, and particular parts of the area which are more difficult than others. So you know, that different approach helps as well, but we could do with the money.
So our final question is from Jordan. She wants to know how you aim to improve employability prospects for young people in Middlesbrough.
Well, Dave mentioned earlier we've got the physical regeneration going on, the new buildings that will bring in good quality jobs, well-paid jobs. But there are some real challenges out there in some of our communities where people are not achieving well at school. They've got particular challenges at home. Part of our social regeneration strategy is we've created something called 50 Futures, and that will be giving people an opportunity to some work experience or an apprenticeship to get people who might be a long way from actually getting secure employment. And I was with the team that are working on that project at the moment, and they're working with the Department of Work and Pensions as well. And some of the success stories already, just within weeks, of people who've had drug and alcohol problems, who've had depression and mental health issues, and perhaps felt that they had no chance of getting a job, befriending them, supporting them, giving them a little taste into work. We've had some successes already, and I know that will go on to have even greater successes. So it's about really getting to those people who find life a real challenge, and as I say, befriending them and supporting them. And we've got lots of employers, including ourselves. We've stepped up to the mark. We're going to offer people good quality work experience and apprenticeships. But we've got people like Marks and Spencer's, we've got people like the football club and others who are also going to offer that. And that's about stepping up to that challenge of creating an environment where people feel they have got something to aspire to.
Yeah, I think we've been a town where DWP in particular have just launched scheme after scheme, often without asking us first. But I think we're doing it for ourselves, as Mick said, and trying to tackle the people who are perhaps furthest from the employment market. We've had many schemes who've helped people who arguably didn't really need the help, and that doesn't help solve any problems. But I think the way our schools are heading, our primary schools are nearly all pretty good now. Secondary schools have improved enormously in the last few years. And again, that's down to hard work by people in the schools, but it's also the fact that we found £2 million to help that process in secondary schools. So, you know, education is often the answer to many of these things, but the 50 Futures that Mick mentioned, that's not a standard scheme. There isn't, you will do this for 2 weeks or whatever. That will be as flexible as the people who are on it. So some people will be in that for months if it takes that long. Some people it will be very short and different. We've got to cater for the individuals rather than have, you know, the bog standard national scheme, which, you know, we've had for years.
So that's it for today. Thank you to Mayor Dave Budd and Councillor Mick Thompson, who's also a Labour mayoral candidate, for joining us today. Thank you for sending in your questions, and bye from all of us at the Northern Voice.